Nathaniel Rourke had always believed that technology could solve anything: disease, weakness, even death itself. As the only son of Malcolm Rourke, founder of the world's leading artificial intelligence empire, his name had been synonymous with breakthroughs that redefined history. His face had graced the covers of Time, Forbes, and nearly every tech journal that mattered. To the world, he was the man destined to save humanity with machines. But tonight, none of those headlines mattered. Only one thing still tried to hold on: a flatlining pulse on a blinking screen. Nate's private ICU glowed in sterile white, immaculate, but colder than steel. The most advanced medical devices in existence surrounded his unconscious body: quantum neuromonitors, automated blood circulation systems, even the nurse bots designed by his own engineers. None of them could stop his heart from slowing. And slowing. Outside, a corridor lined with doctors stood silent as statues. Some had flown in from Zurich, Seoul, Tel Aviv, giants of the medical world. But now they could only watch, powerless. Malcolm Rourke, the man who once commanded battalions, who had signed billion-dollar deals without blinking, now trembled beside his son's bed. He held Nate's cold hand between both of his own, gripping like it was the last thread holding the boy to life. A surgeon finally stepped forward, pulling off his mask with a voice cracked and heavy. "We've tried every available method, Mr. Rourke. We brought in the best minds. But Nathaniel's condition, it's beyond control." Malcolm didn't speak. He just squeezed his son's hand tighter, as if that alone could anchor him to this world for one more beat. Here, in a place where life had always been a matter of purchase and privilege, everything now felt completely powerless. And in that hallway, silence was the loudest sound Malcolm had ever heard. Ava Liang pushed her worn cleaning cart down the marble corridor, just like every other night. Her uniform was faded, her gloves thin, her surgical mask hiding most of her face. No one looked at her twice. To the world, she was just a night shift janitor, nothing more. She had scrubbed these same halls for 3 years. Same time, same route, same distant hum of machines from the ICU where Nathaniel Rourke lay unconscious. She had never dared to enter, only paused briefly, watching through the frosted glass as cold white light spilled across sterile floors. She had memorized the rhythm of the nurses adjusting tubes, the surgeons jotting notes, and especially him, the man the world called the mind of the century, the genius of next-generation AI. But to her, he was patient 4211, a failing heartbeat trapped in a maze of machines that had forgotten what life truly was. Tonight, the air felt different. The hallway was still lit, but eerily quiet. No pages over the intercom, no footsteps. The ICU door was ajar. And Ava knew they had given up. She stopped, hands tightening on the cart. Then, as if something beyond her will moved her feet, she stepped forward, her gloved palm pressed against the glass, her gaze landing on his pale, still face. A security guard noticed her and stepped closer, voice clipped. "You're not allowed here. This floor is restricted. Get back downstairs." Ava didn't move. Her voice was quiet, so quiet he nearly missed it. "I can save him." The words cut through the silence like a pulse. The guard scoffed, half laughing. "Do you even know who that is? The best minds in the world couldn't save him." Ava looked up at him, her eyes calm, but burning with something stronger than hope. "Give me 1 hour, just one, no interference, no cameras, no questions." A nurse moved forward to pull Ava away, but Malcolm Rourke spoke first. His voice wasn't sharp like before. It was hoarse, hollow, stripped of command. "Who are you?" "Just the one who mops your floors," Ava answered. "But I know I can save him, if you'll let me try." The hallway fell into a heavy silence. Doctors exchanged glances. One smirked, another muttered under his breath, "This is madness." Malcolm stepped forward until he stood inches from the girl in the plain gray uniform with no name tag. His eyes were bloodshot, as if he hadn't blinked in hours. "If you're lying," he whispered, "you'll disappear. I'll make sure of it. If I fail, Ava said quietly. "He'll disappear first." No one stopped him when he raised his hand and motioned to unlock the ICU door. Ava stepped inside. The door shut behind her, sealing off the rest of the world. She faced the body slowly slipping into death, surrounded by blinking machines casting pale green reflections across her face. The heart monitor beeped sluggishly, fading. She inhaled once, steadying her breath. Then, gently, she pulled the hospital blanket down, revealing a faded scar on Nate's chest, the ghost of a wound from 5 years ago, a wound she had once closed. In another operating room, without a name, without recognition. Her hand found the faint flutter of a pulse beneath cool skin. Her father's words echoed in her mind. Not every illness is of the body. Sometimes the mind holds the lock, and only steady hands know the key. From her inner pocket, she drew a small leather pouch. Inside were 3 fine needles wrapped in old silk, the only thing she had carried with her through exile. She placed the first needle, her breath falling in sync with his fragile rhythm. Gentle. Exact. Outside, Malcolm pressed his forehead to the glass. No one dared speak. He heard only one quiet thought in his mind, over and over. Sometimes the miracle you're begging for comes from the one you chose never to see. Ava lowered the first needle just beneath the sternum, targeting the intersection of 3 central neural clusters. This wasn't acupuncture. This was a biometric signal map, coded communication between human cognition and internal systems. She hadn't invented the idea. Her father once chased this theory that the body's self-regulation could be reawakened by redirecting neural impulses from within, but Ava had perfected it. In silence, in exile. She placed the second needle, aligning it with the brain's alpha wave cycle. Even in a coma, Nate's brain emitted a weak frequency. She caught it, bridging the central nervous system with the cardiac response, bypassing the cortex entirely, tapping into the body's deepest memory, survival. She had once presented this concept at a medical symposium. Once, before accusations of data theft erased her name, before the research was pulled, before her license was revoked. The third needle slid into place, right where the vagus nerve met the heart's sympathetic ganglia. The pulse flatlined. Ava didn't flinch. She pressed her palm to his chest, closed her eyes. Her lips moved, whispering not a prayer, but a command. This body doesn't want to die. It's just no one's been listening. From the heart monitor, a faint beep broke the stillness, small but unmistakable. Then the first beat. The green line on the monitor began to rise. Slow, jagged, but real. One beep, then another, then another. Outside, the doctor gasped. "He's stabilizing." Malcolm gripped the glass, breath caught between hope and disbelief. Inside, Ava didn't move. She didn't need to look at the machines. She felt it. His chest shifted. His fingers twitched. A weak groan escaped his throat, the rough sound of a man climbing back from the edge. Nate's eyelids fluttered open. The light above him burned so he squinted, and the first thing he saw wasn't his father or the machines around him. It was her, the girl in the gray uniform, her face inches from his, her eyes impossibly calm. He tried to speak, but his lips cracked dry. Ava gently placed her fingers on his wrist. "Don't speak. You have a whole life ahead of you to say what matters. Right now, just live." The door burst open. Malcolm stormed in, disbelief flooding his face as he saw his son. Alive, color returning to his cheeks, monitor steady. He grabbed Ava's arm, nearly trembling. "What did you do? Who are you?" Ava slowly pulled the final needle from Nate's chest, her gaze never leaving him. "I did what you asked. I saved him. But if you want him to live, let him rest." Nate tried to form words again. Ava gave him one last look, then turned to Malcolm. "I need to leave." "No, you don't." Malcolm blocked her path. "You'll stay and explain. Who taught you this? Where did you learn it?" Ava stepped back, calm as ever. But behind her, Nate found his voice. Let her go, Dad. Malcolm turned sharply. You don't understand. I do, Nate rasped, breathing unevenly. She saved me before. I think it was her again. Doctors rushed toward the bed, checking numbers, calling out orders. In the blur of motion, Ava slipped quietly away. Minutes later, she was gone, as if she'd never existed. They searched the cameras, the exits, every corridor. All they found was an empty locker, a neatly folded uniform, and a mop bucket, clean and dry. The second beep came, then another, and another. The jagged green line on the heart monitor crept upward, rising from death back into life. Outside, a doctor gasped, "He's stabilizing!" Malcolm pressed harder against the glass, unable to tear his eyes away from the room caught between despair and miracle. Inside, Ava didn't move. She didn't need to look at the machines. She felt it. His chest shifted. His fingers twitched. A weak groan escaped his throat, the rough sound of a man climbing back from the edge. Nate's eyelids fluttered open. The light above him burned, so he squinted, and the first thing he saw wasn't his father or the machines around him. It was her, the girl in the gray uniform, her face inches from his, her eyes impossibly calm. He tried to speak, but his lips cracked dry. Ava gently placed her fingers on his wrist. Don't speak. You have a whole life ahead of you to say what matters. Right now, just live. The door burst open. Malcolm stormed in, disbelief flooding his face as he saw his son alive, color returning to his cheeks, monitors steady. He grabbed Ava's arm, nearly trembling. What did you do? Who are you? Ava slowly pulled the final needle from Nate's chest, her gaze never leaving him. I did what you asked. I saved him. But if you want him to live, let him rest. Nate tried to form words again. Ava gave him one last look, then turned to Malcolm. I need to leave. No, you don't. Malcolm blocked her path. You'll stay and explain. Who taught you this? Where did you learn it? Ava stepped back, calm as ever, but behind her, Nate found his voice. Let her go, Dad. Malcolm turned sharply. You don't understand. I do, Nate rasped, breathing unevenly. She saved me before. I think it was her again. While the ICU buzzed with monitors and voices calling out stabilized vitals, Nathaniel Rourke only watched one thing. Her no name, no title, no goodbye, she walked out of the room he just returned to life in, quietly, like she had never meant to be seen in the first place. But he knew her even as his head throbbed, his lungs ached, and his heart struggled to remember how to beat. He knew... Not her face. But the feeling, it had happened before. 5 years ago, he'd collapsed on a golf course near Boston. His heart had stopped for several minutes. The doctors called it an unexplained miracle. But tonight, looking into her eyes, a memory surfaced. Not in his mind, but in his body. The feel of warm fingers pressing against his chest, the presence of someone who refused to walk away when everyone else already had, the certainty of being saved by someone who never needed his name. She had been there, both times, and both times the world turned its back on her. The first time, no one knew her name. The second time, no one bothered to ask. Nate looked around at the doctors now celebrating his stabilization like it was their victory. But they didn't know. They had failed. Only she, the one no one saw, had done what science no longer believed possible. And now she was gone. Again. This time, he wouldn't let it end that way. Nathaniel Rourke couldn't sleep. After his discharge, he spent hours sitting by the window of his high-rise office, watching the city lights flicker. But his mind was elsewhere. On a dim hallway, a calm pair of eyes, and 3 thin needles like neural threads pulling him back from death. He used to believe in technology, in the absolute logic of machines. But that night, surrounded by millions in medical equipment, It was someone the system couldn't even identify who brought him back. Now he had to know who she was. He searched everything: surveillance tapes, staff logs, shift records. All trails led to a false name: Ava Liang. No social security number, no next of kin, no official employment history, just a shadow. He didn't tell his father. Malcolm Rourke still believed it was a miracle, but Nate had stopped believing in miracles. In a dusty archive room beneath the hospital, he found an old intern photo dated 5 years ago, the same year he nearly died for the first time. Among the group of young residents, he saw her. Not a janitor. She was Dr. Eleanor Liang, a neurobiology resident at Johns Hopkins, known for her radical research into autonomic neural signaling and biocircuit reprogramming. Her name had once been printed in scientific journals until it vanished. He found articles that had since been deleted, news reports calling it the greatest research theft scandal of the decade. She had been accused of stealing data from a corporate partner, Helix Core Technologies, a company that once had a multi-billion-dollar alliance with his family's tech empire. She was never put on trial, but the university revoked her degree, the medical board erased her license, she lost everything in one summer. Nate felt a chill crawl up his spine as he read through a confidential transfer report. 2 biotech patents, matching her research signature, had been funneled into a shell company weeks after the scandal broke. There was no doubt now, she had been buried. Not just her name, but her future, her breakthroughs, her chance to save lives. And he was the only one she had ever saved, twice. Once when he didn't know her name, again when the world had forgotten it. He couldn't stay silent anymore. He called Oliver Hale, an old Harvard friend, now a legal bloodhound for buried truths. They met in a quiet glass office high above the city. Nate laid out everything he'd found across the table. They nearly just steal her work. They nearly killed her with silence. Oliver scanned the pages, pausing on a redacted resume, and nodded slowly. If you go through with this, it's war. Nate leaned back in his chair, eyes steady on the truth. And let me be the one who starts it. Eleanor Liang sat still in the dim, tile-floored kitchen of a nameless apartment building, the flickering fluorescent light above ticking like a tired heartbeat. On the table lay the thick envelope Nathaniel Rourke had left days earlier, stuffed with legal documents, copies of evidence, and one unsigned note. Let me bring you back. She didn't need to read much to understand what he meant. Court, public testimony, full exposure. It had been 5 years since her name appeared on any official document, and that one had revoked her medical license. 5 years since she'd last stood in front of a panel and was called a traitor to science. She had learned how to survive in shadows. Being invisible was the only thing that had kept her safe. But something in the way Nate looked at her, not with pity, but with trust, stirred something inside her she thought had long since died. "Emily, don't know how cruel the system can be," she whispered to him one night, her voice rough as dying embers. "I do," he said, "because they tried it with me. But you didn't let me disappear. Now it's my turn." She was quiet for a long time. Then, almost too soft to hear, "Fine, but I won't walk into that courtroom as a ghost. I'll walk in with my name." When Eleanor Liang stood in front of the mirror wearing a plain black suit, tying her hair back, looking herself in the eye, not the janitor, not the forgotten girl, she saw the reflection of someone who once dreamed of saving millions. And for the first time in years, she didn't look away. The courtroom wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. The silence was thick, like the air before a storm. Every gaze locked onto Eleanor Liang as she stepped up to testify. Dark suit, steady hands, low voice, but the clarity in her eyes made the room hold its breath. Across from her sat Helix Core, the corporation that had buried her life in a single summer. And now they were back, armed with the same weapon, her past. "You were disbarred by the Maryland Medical Board," their attorney began coolly. "Your license revoked. All appeals denied." Eleanor didn't blink. The press once called you a research thief, a disgrace to modern medicine. Do you have any response to these allegations?" She raised her head and met his gaze. "I do, but I'd prefer to let the data speak first." She opened a folder, thick, frayed, stained by time and secrecy. Inside were neural schematics, signal pathway blueprints, biomedical sequences, all handwritten, all hers. "This is the system I built. Every circuit, every line. I don't need to explain it to someone who's never touched a patient." "And you claim all of this was stolen?" the lawyer scoffed. "Do you have anything besides your memory to back that up?" A recording played. A male voice, cautious but clear. "The girl knows too much. We need to shut her down before she talks." It was a former senior Helix Corps manager. It was evidence. The courtroom froze. The attorney objected. This audio was obtained illegally, inadmissible. Eleanor didn't respond. She stepped forward, clicked the projector. A 3D model lit up. Her exact technique, the same one that had saved Nathaniel Rourke, rendered flawlessly. "This is the method that revived someone your experts declared unsavable. I don't need to convince you, I only need to show the truth." Helix Corps didn't stop. They flashed headlines on the screen. Eleanor Liang, from prodigy to pariah. The woman who tainted a research institute. The cost of ambition, a medical star falls. Each one a cut. But Eleanor didn't bow. She turned slowly, voice quieter now, but still sharp. "You can drown me in headlines and call me every name you want, but don't forget, his heart beats because I was brave enough to stand where you ran." Behind her, Nate's hand clenched. He didn't have to speak. She had said it all. "I wasn't silenced because I was wrong," Eleanor continued. "I was silenced because I was right, and I refused to sell that truth to those afraid of it." No one objected, no one interrupted, because in that room, for the first time in 5 years, her voice was heard. The media storm didn't fade the moment the verdict came. Hundreds of headlines hailed Eleanor as a resurrection story. Some networks called her the quiet hero. Journalists who once ignored her downfall now raced to rediscover the brilliance of Eleanor Liang. But she didn't stay there. She didn't chase the lights, didn't accept interviews, didn't sit on talk shows. She vanished from the spotlight again. But this time, not to hide. This time, to rebuild. A small laboratory, repurposed from an unused floor of Rourke Medical, became her space. No signage, no corporate logo, but every night its lights burned long past midnight. There, Eleanor did what she had always wanted to do. Research, uninterrupted, untouched, unpriced. The first place they moved into together wasn't a luxurious villa or a penthouse with skyline views like the ones Nate once knew. It was an old warehouse on the edge of the city, with rusted steel beams and peeling brick walls, where traffic thinned out and silence could finally be heard. There, Ava and Nate started over, not with ambition, but with a promise. No one should ever own life. They transformed the old structure into an independent research center. No shareholders, no PR teams, no meetings where lives were reduced to stock value. Only people who believed in science, in ethics, and in something no profit margin could define, trust between human beings. Ava returned to the lab, not for the spotlight, not for recognition. She simply wanted to pick up where her life had once been severed. Unfinished signal maps, untested circuits, patients left waiting in silence. This time, no one redlined her papers. No one told her a method wasn't marketable enough. Nate stayed by her side. No longer behind boardroom tables, no longer on magazine covers, he soldered sensors, carried boxes, monitored 3D printers, and read every manuscript she drafted, as if each line of code were a lifeline he had to protect. They lived slowly, a terrifying concept to the outside world, but to them, each minute together was a full hour, survived past hell. They learned to speak less, to listen more. Some nights, Ava would write code for 7 hours straight, and Nate would quietly set a warm cup of tea beside her without saying a word. When she looked up, his gaze was still there, watching, holding space. Their love didn't strike like lightning. It grew like morning light through a cracked window. Soft, patient, steady. A hand reaching for hers when frustration cracked her voice. A kiss on her forehead when she fell asleep at the desk. A whispered, "I'm here," when she woke from another nightmare. But Ime didn't talk much about the future, because they had survived too many endings to count. So they simply lived the present. And in that present, after all the scars and silence, they had built something they could finally call home. There were days when Ava believed their lives had finally softened. She began organizing her research into sequences again, drafting plans for a new clinical trial. Nate learned how to live slower, trading coffee for tea, business forecasts for novels. They called that stretch of time the quiet season. Brief, but long enough for their hearts to start believing that the past had finally let go. But peace, for people like them, was often just a brief pause before the next storm. Ava noticed it first, in the kind of details most people would overlook. The way Nate winced climbing stairs, the way his sentences paused mid-thought, as if chasing lost words. The first time Ava noticed something was wrong was when Nate misplaced a chip in the simulation board. It was a minor error, but with someone like him, it rang louder than sirens. A few days later, he collapsed in the lab, just for seconds, but long enough for Ava to reach his side, heart pounding like it had the day she first watched his pulse flatline. The test results left no room for wishful thinking. The old condition had returned, more aggressive this time. Fibrotic tissue was spreading fast, smothering the ventricles. The best cardiologists recommended waiting for a synthetic transplant, a procedure still in early trials. But Ava knew Nate didn't have time to wait. She didn't sleep for 3 nights. The desk was a battlefield of diagrams, neural signal maps, 3D reconstructions, and one file labeled "not approved for human testing," a project she once buried with the rest of her disgraced career. But this wasn't theory anymore. This was Nate, and she couldn't let him go. "We have to leave," she said, voice trembling but steady. "We need a place where the law doesn't chain my hands." They flew at night. Their baggage held only data drives, a box of customized tools, and a promise left unfinished. "You have to live, not for me, but because the world still needs people like you." In a remote country, they rented a long-forgotten surgical wing inside a private institute. The team was only 3. Ava, an aging surgeon who once mentored her, and a silent technician who asked no questions. In that sterile room that smelled of antiseptic and steel, Ava moved through preparations with the precision of someone who knew any misstep could mean permanent loss. Nate lay still, eyes closed, breathing thin. His face no longer held the pride of a man once crowned by the world. Only a quiet peace remained, as if he trusted her more than life itself. "I'm scared," Ava whispered, resting her palm over his chest. "I'm not," Nate said softly, "because if this is the end, I want it to end in your hands." She cried, but she started anyway. Not because she wasn't afraid, but because love is the only thing that makes us brave enough to face the impossible. The surgery lasted over 11 hours. Every minute passed like a heartbeat suspended between life and death. Ava didn't leave the operating table, not even once. Her hands trembled, her eyes burned. Her own heartbeat seemed to sync with every number blinking on the screen. When the final suture was tied and a clean, steady signal lit up, sharp, rhythmic, unwavering, it was as if the world exhaled. Life had returned. She peeled off her gloves, her palms soaked in cold sweat. She sank into a metal chair in the corner of the room, just beyond the surgical lights. Her head dropped beside him, as if the weight of everything she had carried finally let go. No one dared disturb her. 3 hours later, Nate opened his eyes. The first light he saw wasn't the harsh white of a sterile hospital. It was soft, golden, warm. The monitors weren't screaming. No doctors rushed in. Only her. Davos slumped beside his bed, one hand still wrapped around his, like she was holding on to life itself. He lifted his free hand and brushed his fingers through her hair. As she stirred awake, startled, he whispered, "No more ghosts." She looked at him as if afraid to believe it was real, but the heart monitor kept ticking, steady, alive. And for the first time in years, she believed. He would truly live. Weeks later, they stood on the top floor of the research center they rebuilt from the ashes. Below them, the city glowed, loud, greedy, relentless. The same city that once tried to erase them from every file, every headline, every memory. But here, high above the noise, the wind touched only them. Ava squeezed Nate's hand. He squeezed back, firm and steady. No words needed. The pain, the loss, the scars, they were turning into light. They didn't need forgiveness. They didn't need praise. They just needed to live and love as they truly were. After everything they had survived, Ava and Nate's love didn't spark like a wildfire. It grew like morning sunlight through a window, warm, quiet, persistent. They started again with small things. Cooking breakfast together. Sometimes the eggs were burnt and the coffee bitter. She got used to seeing him laugh while doing the dishes, and he never minded when she lost track of time in the lab. Every scar on their skin or deep in memory was something they faced together now. There were no more tears hidden in the dark, no more pretending to be unbreakable. Each night, while the city roared outside, they sat together in their little apartment above the research center, reading, playing music, or simply sharing a silence that never felt lonely. One night, Nate said, "I used to think love was something I wasn't lucky enough to have. But you didn't come to rescue me. You came to live beside me, day by day." Ava didn't answer. She just took his hand, as she had so many times before. But this time, it wasn't a promise to survive. It was a choice. A love that didn't come from glory, didn't need vows written in stone, but grew from every fall, every rise, and the quiet decision to still turn toward each other. One morning, Nate placed a bunch of wildflowers on her desk. Ava looked up and asked, "We've been through everything. Are you still afraid?" Nate smiled, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "I'm not afraid of anything as long as you're still here."